Assalamu alaikum everybody. It's an extreme pleasure for me to welcome Zia for today's talk. जैसे I think आप में से काफ़ी लोग Friday को भी event पे थे. Zia and I go way back. Kundi के साथ it was since 1993 and with Zia it's since 1994. Zia and Ali are class fellows, but we've known each other from GIK days. And we have stayed in very close contact ever since. When I was in the Bay Area, I was in the Bay Area, so we are family friends as well. हम लोगों ने football की leagues इकट्ठी खेली हुई हैं. We will not go into those details, right? And I think Zia was considered to be one of the most brilliant minds even when we were in undergrad. Also, हमसे ये एक साल junior था, लेकिन the legend was sort of it spread all around. And if I remember correctly, so when you were in the final year, that is when the motorway project also. So I think those were the days जब पाकिस्तान की पहले motorway बन रही थी, and there was no toll system available at the time. And I don't know what was the state of the industry at the time, because that project was awarded to GIK. And Zia was one of the core members of that team, right? So जो पहली implementation आपके toll system की motorways के ऊपर थी, वो Zia and his team did while they were students, right? And that system actually went into production, mass production, and it actually worked as well, right? It worked, right? Anyway, GIK के बाद I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Zia went to CMU for masters, which is one of the top schools of computer science. And then he moved immediately to the Bay Area, Siebel. Yep. Yeah, so Siebel, and then after Siebel, he went to Google. This was the early days of Google, right? This is pre-IPO Google. This was the time जब Gmail नहीं था, right? And I think Zia was a part of the core team behind the Gmail infrastructure as well. So distributed systems, backend systems, so he spent a lot of time at Google. फिर हमने एक इकट्ठा venture भी किया. So my first startup, Zia was my co-founder in Crickout, right? So we did that together. Of course, I mean, उसकी story एक अलग है. But then Zia went on to building a product called ClipMind, जिसकी interestingly core development, front-end की development Emumba में हो रही थी. That company was eventually acquired by Twitch, which I had not heard of at the time. लेकिन आप चूँकि सारे gamers हैं, तो you would know, it's a big name. It's an Amazon company, and for some time we actually provided some services to Twitch as well. Then Zia joined Google back again. I think एक साल Amazon में गुजारने के बाद Twitch में, then back in Google for a few years, and then I think he's off to doing another startup. So you can give a bit of a background on that, right? So when Zia was visiting, I was thinking कि we should pick a topic, right? And Zia had a couple of very techy topics, right? He said कि मैं MLOps पे बात करता हूँ. And I said, that's a great topic, but perhaps for our larger audience, it has a narrow implication. Because yes, we are doing some work on MLOps, but if I look at across the organization, that is perhaps not the most important topic in terms of criticality or urgency for us. So I suggested, since you've been running some of the top engineering teams in the world, right? Why don't you give us a clue or hint into the top practices that high performance teams follow, right? So personal insights into that. So I suggested that topic, it got him excited, and with that, over to you, Zia. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. Thanks, Awais, for such an amazing introduction. I think the reality often kind of gets hidden behind a lot of small failures and successes that we never get to talk about. But I mean, it has been a great journey with Awais and Rizvi. I think Awais did not mention the number, but I think we have known each other for 27 years now. And Rizvi, no, 28 years, both same, right, now. So it's a long way. And I was just discussing the other day with a friend that people who are going to GIK now, they were not even born when we were there and we were graduating. So it has been a long time. As far as this presentation is concerned, as Awais said that he suggested, let's talk about this topic. I've not talked about formally. Informally, within teams, you go talk and you always are expressing your opinions, how you should be doing things. But it's not something I've talked about in the past. So this is the first time actually I'll be like organizing my thoughts. So, I mean, if I feel surprised by some of the bullets, don't worry. I mean, we'll just kind of, if it is interactive and we are talking, asking questions, I think that's probably the best way to use this time. Secondly, I think it's too easy to, I guess, assume that somebody can come and talk about these attributes and like give you like some kind of a cheat sheet where you can take it and like kind of start building on top of it. I mean, anybody who has, I have done my master's in software engineering, everybody who has done it enough, they know that there is no silver bullet, right? You eventually have to figure out what works for you. But there are some like key points, key things that you can share that I think work in general, but at the end, every team has to kind of figure it out on their own. So with that, I guess, I mean, Avas talked about what I've done. I was lucky enough that I got early access to computers and just found myself programming and like learning on my own. It was helpful, like at age of 12, I exactly knew what I wanted to do. And so that was helpful. And have spent more than 20 years out of that, 14 years in Google, 5 years in startups / Twitch and Amazon, and have led very small teams to like very large teams. I would say my sweet spot is definitely doing like highly ambiguous, highly technical tasks with small but very talented and very capable teams and like moving fast. Typically, I don't know if you guys have heard the term 0 to 1, like where things are so ambiguous and unclear, like figuring out who's the first customer going to be or what we should be building, how to solve this technically challenging problem. So that's where I have spent, I would say, most of my time, but I have directly and indirectly managed teams. And so I did, when I talked to Avas, I actually listed all the projects and teams that I've managed, and I started listing like what made them successful or unsuccessful. So maybe I can like get some insights into kind of what I can personally talk about. Of course, there's tons of material available online where you can kind of like, people have, Google did this project called Atlantis or something like that, where they've analyzed all engineering teams at Google and figured out what are the common attributes. So I think some of that is inspired by those learnings also, and some of it is kind of, I guess, my own unique experience. I think in terms of first thing that comes to mind, like when you are building any engineering team, I think I have, especially with companies like, by the way, Google is a big company. Most of the time you're trying to push the limits of something. And many times you don't exactly know, like a startup, like what should be built, what is the product market fit. So I think knowing what do you want to do or what's the end goal, as hard as it is, I think that's where kind of we don't many times kind of put enough time. And you will do one-on-ones with, if a team that doesn't know where it is going, is their work secure, or anybody else will come and take over, or will this team be disbanded? You spend tons of time discussing those kind of things if you don't know what you are doing, where you are headed. So I think clarity of purpose is probably a very generic umbrella, but it is actually a very important thing, and people often don't talk about enough. And often, like in teams which are doing high-risk things, talking about existential crisis, okay, will we survive, is not the easiest thing to do. So I think this is something kind of should be, in my opinion, an important and a first-class topic in team meetings and discussions, like why do we exist, what we are trying to do. And I think that's where whoever your stakeholder is, getting a clear mandate, like for example, if your CEO, your org leaders, and ownership is super important. Okay, yes, this is the team, this is your goal. They may not tell you, they may tell you like where you want to go, but they may not know the path, and you have to figure it out. But you have to kind of have this conversation, like what those high-level goals are in general. And those goals have to be kind of, engineering will not be interesting if they're simple goals. Yes, if the goal is very simple, people have done it tens of times, you don't necessarily probably need a high-performing engineering team to do that. It becomes usually relevant when you're trying to do something hard and something challenging. And also as a company, if you are doing things which are simple, probably you will not be able to differentiate yourself from others. So I think whatever goals you set with your stakeholders, it is important that those are some of them are stretch goals that push your limits. Make smart people who want to grow. I mean, they are of course interested in like doing things which are mentally stimulating, technically challenging, because it helps them grow, it helps the team grow. So I think goals are challenging. If the goals are too easy, maybe that's the first thing to first thing to worry about. Are we thinking hard enough or not? Are we pushing ourselves hard enough or not? And those goals also, whenever you achieve, this should be measurable. I mean, I think a lot of people talk about data-driven development, that everything should be measurable in terms of numbers and whatnot, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a number. If you are trying to do a customer-driven project, then yes, you can have a measurable goal, which is like, oh, we are going to reduce the latency of this API by this many seconds or this many milliseconds, or we will add this feature. You can maybe quantify it in that areas. If you are many times doing like cost reduction, like you're trying to reduce your bottom line, you can also quantify those things. But many times you're doing things which are just strategic in nature. And I think that is where it is important that you know, like, whoever your stakeholders or CEOs or organization leaders are, they kind of, you have their support. So for example, many times people will do things in companies, they're taking risks and they don't know if those risks will bring any customer revenue, or will they want to just explore a new idea. So I think that's where good communication with stakeholders is super important. A tech lead or a manager who can do this both upwards influence, downwards influence, and there doesn't have to be tech lead manager. Many times there are people in the team who will just realize that, senior people in the team, that this is important, and they will identify, oh, there is an elephant in the room. We don't know why we are doing the goal that we're trying to accomplish. Is it worth achieving or not? And then that can kind of inspire that kind of discussion. And as I said, I started the slide with a discussion that at least when I went back to Google second time, 4 years, we were like building Google Cloud AI platform called Vertex AI. A lot of the components of those platforms, nobody has done this before. And so teams will constantly be worried, like, oh, are we going to have any customer? So you can like kind of tell, like, through one-on-ones, through team meetings, that people are worried about it. And I think if you don't get that, how would I say, air support from your leadership, like, hey, this is we are going to do, we are going to spend, or I would say a conviction of sorts. Okay, we are going to do it. We're going to give it 2 years, regardless of what happens as outcome. We're going to figure it out. If it fails, that fails. But that understanding with stakeholders is super important. And in big companies like Google, it is too easy. Multiple people are working on similar things, and people being concerned about, oh, if these projects will survive on their own or not. Especially true if you're doing high risk and highly ambiguous tasks. I'll just take a pause here and see, if people have any questions and if they can relate to it, first of all.
I have a big question. So when you started, you actually addressed some of the answers, but I wanted them to be brought out a little bit. So the thing is, when you say clarity of purpose, that's great, but you also started a high performance team, you want to do something which is ambiguous, and 0 to 1, you don't know what the 1 is, you need to get to it. Now that seems, opposite in some sense. So, that's the thing I want you to elaborate on. Okay? This uncertainty that is at the start of any new project, product that exists because it's difficult. How do you connect that with clarity? What's the engineering side of purpose of clarity over there?
So I think
definition is not here.
Exactly. So that's why I think it's not like a one-way thing, right? It's always a negotiation. Your leadership as well doesn't know what needs to be done. You don't know. So that's why you have to come up with some goal, some standing goal, like maybe this is worth achieving. As you go through the journey, you figure out, oh, we were wrong, and then you go back and you say, oh, we made a mistake, right? And we think the goal should be like this, right? And this happens, I think, in startups almost all the time, daily basis, but happens in as I said, teams who are kind of pushing the envelope and doing cutting edge stuff. So I think it is a negotiation. It's not an iteration, like you iterate and then you slowly reduce or kind of remove risks and you get more clarity. And hopefully, I don't know, if it is 1 year long project, maybe you spend 2-3 months figuring it out and you know what you want to do. But that iteration never ends actually, because once you're done, you'll probably set up with your sight on some other highly ambiguous or high risk and high value target, and then that negotiation will happen again. Is that what you were asking?
No, I was asking that. What I wanted was from the engineering perspective side.
Oh.
So if you reflect on what is sufficient vagueness, because a lot of times you have to operate in vagueness, but there is also a demand from engineering teams specifically that they want clarity and they want some testing there. And if you're going to change by, so I'm just trying to reflect on that.
I think you need to, I think, first of all, divide the time horizon in smaller units, right? You cannot see many times more than 6 months ahead. In fact, many times you cannot even see more than 3 months ahead. So I think if you can, depending on, Amazon one saying is that you have to make decision with 70% of the knowledge. You're never going to know 100% sure how things are going to be. So based on whatever you know, set some goals with understanding that, I mean, these goals may be wrong and may be tweaked. So I think from engineering perspective, let's say, I mean, I went through this exercise quite a bit in my recent experience at Google, so that even leadership did not know what to do. So we created some, what do you call, placeholder tasks, like we will implement system X and it will handle, it was an optimization system. I don't want to kind of go into too many technical details. It was optimizing things for retail customers, how should they plan their supply chain networks so that, I mean, they can see problems ahead of time, where the shortage is going to be, where the delay is going to be. They can do like kind of what if analysis. And this is a huge space. Nobody knows kind of, what kind of problems can go wrong. And so we decided like, oh, we're going to start, we cannot start a system which can deal with 1,000 SKUs or products, 1 million SKUs or products right away. So we set targets. So we're going to start with 400,000, because the customer said that they want to do this thing. So we just set a target like, oh, we are going to deal with these many SKUs, these many warehouses, these many data centers. Is it everything we are going to do? Definitely not. But is it a good enough goal? That's the timing part I was saying for the next 3-6 months, where we learn, we mature our understanding. That's pretty good enough. So I think, yeah, I mean, you have to kind of find placeholder tasks until it's kind of like navigation. You may not exactly know how to get to the top, and you can like kind of along the way keep evaluating trajectories and keep saying if you're doing good or not. So I hope.
I have a follow-up question. So perhaps two parts of the question. One is, we're talking about the mandate of the team and ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the same thing distills to individuals then, right? So every individual in the team needs to have a relatively mandate and of course a sense of ownership. How important is it to have those things written down, particularly when you have a relatively younger team with not very mature participants, right? That's the first part. And the second part, well, maybe let's take that.
No, by the way, this is a great question, because I think Amazon has a great culture on writing things down and making them clear. Writing brings clarity, even if, and especially with goals. I think some of the best people that I have worked with, they are super good at, for example, they immediately realize that, oh, things are ambiguous, right? Things may change along the way. How does it impact them, like in terms of their performance growth? We are giving them some target. Even expectations management, right? A lot of discussion happens like, oh, you will tell them like, oh, you need to achieve this, and that whatever they say, it's not clear. So I think there may be, in some cultures, there may be some aversion like to making things concrete, like the individuals may feel like, oh, if I take this thing written to my boss and say, this is my agreement with you, is it like, I don't know what culture at Emumba is, it may be considered weird, but I think it's a culture that can be developed. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that writing is super important. It forces people to be concrete. If you're just talking in words, people can say whatever they want, people forget. People say one thing, they mean sometime another thing. Language in itself is a very kind of, even when you write it, it is still very ambiguous, but spoken words, I mean, they just kind of ambiguities kind of off the charts there. So I think writing should not be too elaborate. For example, the negotiation or expectations that I would have with my team would be like, they have a career growth document, let's say, and then one section is that in next 6 months, what are they trying to achieve? And we will say, I mean, in the area of leadership, these are your goals, and we will make it concrete, and it is iteration. And those young people or those employees will own the document, and their responsibility is to drive this with you. If they don't see clarity, say, I don't think this goal is clear enough. I mean, can you help me make it clarify? Can you give me a concrete goal? And that's the job of a more senior, experienced and technical person, just like you're saying, to kind of, even if you don't know, and I think that's the core job of it, like when you don't know, how can you create this like intermediate, sometime maybe artificial goal to keep things moving in the right direction? So yeah, I mean, I am big on writing, but I'm big on one-pagers. If you can write what you want to do on one-pager, I think that's even few bullet points, that goes a long way. Is it a point of discussion at Emumba?
I think my general feeling is that in some of the projects where we were facing a lot of team connectivity issues, we did this experiment of documenting the goals. So that people knew exactly what was expected of them, and that had a huge impact.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So it had a huge impact, and it seems like it's something that we should do as a process. So some projects are much more mature in terms of the longevity of the team and the history of the team, and others are more sort of new, more challenging, more ambiguous.
I think it's worth talking about. I didn't want to specifically talk about OKRs that Google popularized, right? I think even Google is changing now. There used to be like every 3 months you will do OKRs. Now they're going to 6 months. Now they're aligning it, especially in enterprise and cloud, they're aligning with customer deliverables. They're doing every 6 months because planning cycles are extremely heavy and intensive. But if you can do lightweight planning for OKRs, personal OKRs, team OKRs, and you can like have some goals associated with it, and you can like evaluate it like spending few days every quarter, then 3 months is fine. But if it takes more than that, then you have to think like, what is the right cadence? But I think in general for Google it worked very well for a very long period of time. Only recently some organizations have started to like diverge from the quarterly OKRs and going into 6 months and those cadences. Any other question from this area? Go ahead.
Regarding OKRs, there are some company OKRs, right? With respect to customer deliverables and business, whatnot. How do they map onto the engineering OKRs? I mean, what sort of process did you use to follow?
It used to be the case at Google that a lot of things were, I mean, I don't want to keep referring to Google. I just like most of my experiences with that, so I'll just refer to it and you can map it to your experiences. It used to be bottom up, like engineers will decide, because a lot of products that we were building, they were like thought by the engineers, like, oh, Gmail should have this feature, search and all those things. So people will write their OKRs and they will create some impact, and this, and they will convince their leadership like this, but they should be working. Enterprise world is definitely different. I mean, enterprise world, there's both top-down and bottom-up pressure. So typically what will happen is that at the beginning of every OKR cycle, the leadership will set like, oh, these are the company or org-wide OKRs for this area, and they will have, and they cannot define the OKR for like 40,000 employees in cloud. But what they will do is that this is what cloud as an org cares about in next 6 months. These are the important customer deals that we have to do, and these are like important areas which are blocking customer acquisition, so we have to do that. And then they will share it with everybody, like, hey, whatever you do, make sure that your key core work is aligned with this thing, and some teams will be automatically covered, and those some teams can have some more freedom. Like if you are the team responsible for unblocking that particular feature that the customer is waiting for, then your OKRs should align with that. So they give you a roadmap, and the leadership teams are always working on figuring out what that roadmap is going to be by talking to customers, by getting the feedback from sales and technical sales, so they know what the 6 months is going to look like. And then engineering teams will go look at those and set their goals accordingly. So that roadmap has to exist. I think Emumba is customer and services driven organization, so I would assume you can create that charter or roadmap to a certain extent, and then engineering team can say, oh, first of all, you can always negotiate. So this is too risky of a goal, we don't have enough resources, etc. And that roadmap allows for that negotiation to happen. And if you feel that those are right goals, then you can set goals, yes, under this objective, we will achieve this key result, like we will improve the latency by 10%, or we will implement this security horizontal, which is important for a customer to be onboarded. And so it's kind of like, again, more of a back and forth process, and typically we will go through multiple reviews to actually make those OKRs concrete and take them kind of to the end. Usually takes for us easily 2 to 3 weeks of process, which is not great. It can be done quicker too, but the thing is that when the hierarchies become deeper, everybody has opinion, getting reviews for VPs and whatnot takes time. So yeah, I mean, long answer to your question, but I mean, if you have the roadmap, I guess managers and tech leads should have enough experience to create those intermediate goals, and get your team's agreement on it. And it is typically what we do is that we will have OKRs in our teams that align with, let's say, what Thomas Kurian is telling us, but we will have other OKRs too that Thomas Kurian doesn't care about, but we know कि हमें refactoring करनी है, right? Team's productivity is low, we will buy that time with our leadership. Or we have to learn some new stuff, right? Or we have to grow the team, we'll be spending 20% of our time in hiring. So you have to kind of negotiate and put those things down in your OKRs. So. And second thing, I think that is my personal favorite has been like fast experimentation and iteration speed. And I mean, you will also hear the word fail fast and learn fast. I mean, it's a pretty generic term, but I guess the idea is the same. Modern engineering is all about taking risks and you not knowing what you're going to do. So if you are taking, I remember when I joined Google, I mean, in 2004, we were serving enterprise companies. We were building this search appliance boxes, and I think our release cycle used to be every 6 months or maybe a year. Probably it worked with that, but if you are in consumer business, in Gmail, in search, I mean, those kind of iteration cycles are massive. You're not going to fix problems or kind of keep up with your competition at that level. So I mean, especially when you don't know what you're building, doing fast iterations, setting up this intermediate goals, learning, oh, we set the wrong goals or it was not the right thing to do, and quickly reassessing and quickly moving forward is super important. And I think we kind of touched somewhat already, that you're never going to know something for sure. And I would say in almost all teams, you'll find people who are either so kind of able to deal with ambiguity that they will not write anything down. And then there are people who will not even move until they exactly know kind of what needs to be done. I see some people smiling. I think they can relate to some of these experiences. So I think you have to kind of strike a balance there. That, I mean, I think the other side is completely wrong, because people say, oh, things move so fast. How can you like kind of write these goals? Who knows what is happening in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months? And I think the fundamental exercise of goal setting is not that, I mean, you're going to set perfect goals. The one part is you can set a goal, right? Because without that, I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. So as long as you can keep doing that exercise, even when you go to investors, you give them business plan, like this is what we are going to do. They know that whatever you're saying is going to be invalid in like 6 months, but what they're seeing is that are you capable of at least looking at what you know now and set those goals, and can you do this thing again and again and again. So that's the most important thing. So living with ambiguity and striking the right balance, like what kind of goals you can set, I think is a very difficult exercise. And there are some people, I would say one of the main skills for managers at least should be to figure out, like, I mean, what kind of goals they can set in the face of ambiguity. Actually, let me go back. And I think that experimentation has to be integrated in both the product and the development process, like iteration. I guess with product, people can understand, like they can do iteration. Let's say they don't know what color the button should be, what size it should be. They have experimentation tools and they can figure it out. But anybody know, like, how can you do, I mean, experimentation as far as the development process is concerned? Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
You can do some smaller experiment at that level, but at higher level, someone may want to see, are we trying to move away from, let's say, Scrum to Kanban or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But smaller experiments, retrospective is
Bilkul, I think retrospective helps you kind of figure out, but I think development process in Bazuka, when you don't know what you're doing, I mean, I think many people are of the mentality that you design once and then design twice and write once. Spend as much time in designing and like doing requirement analysis, but before you get things concrete, and then you start writing coding. But I think what we have found, at least in startup and Google experience, that a lot of time having willingness to write throwaway code is also key. Because if you say, oh, why should I write this code if it is not going to exist? Many times you learn about how to solve the problem, how to build it when you write the code for the first time. So I think even in development process, saying, for example, in Google, we have an actually whole experimental directory where you can like put code, actual code in the main directories. You have to be code reviewed and whatnot. But experimental directories, you can go write whatever you want. You cannot push it to production, of course. And people write tons and tons of code. Many projects kind of get rewritten in 2 years. Many times, the first version of the project that you wrote, we worked on a very massive scale storage system in 2009, 10, and 11. I would say we kind of threw away the first version of it because we didn't even know what kind of risk we will run into until we built first system. We deployed it and we figured out it will fail miserably. Like most of our design, or some of our key design assumptions were wrong. And there was a tussle in the team, like, oh, some people will say, oh, we should not, this was kind of a wasted time. We should have thought more about it, right? We should have designed it well. But the fact is that, I mean, you could not have learned those lessons until you have implemented and you say, okay, this code, we learned something from it. Maybe we take some libraries, some lessons from it, we throw away, and then you start from scratch. So I think, I mean, that's both in startup world and in like fast moving teams doing new things, that willingness and that sometimes you have people like who wrote code so fast and like they're so good at it, you don't have to convince them like this is a good thing. But some people, I don't know, take coding to be a very holy activity. It has to be done with proper guidelines and whatnot. But I think you have to know where it works and where it does not work. Any questions, thoughts?
So talking about failing fast, so I'm a bit confused about how do we create a balance between like, failing fast and not being able to produce anything. So जब हम बात कर रहे थे, we should like try out different things, experimenting on different things. But उस experimentation में कई दफ़ा हमें जो चीज़ें deliver करनी होती हैं वो रह भी सकती हैं. So how do we create a balance between these?
So is that from the audience? Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I was about to actually this time. I did not repeat last. So they were asking like, sorry, go ahead.
One more thing. Sorry, I forgot.
No, you think about the question. I will try answering the first part.
Yeah.
So the question is, if you are failing fast and you're experimenting, how do you deliver on the promises? And I think the basic assumption in this question is that failing fast, you do it on your own time, you do it on the weekend. And actual delivery, you do it on the weekdays. So no, this has to be part of planning, right? If you know the task is ambiguous, right? You have to negotiate that, oh, I think we don't know enough about this product that we can say, okay, we are going to deliver it. We will have this experimentation cycle. We will quickly deploy it. We will do this quick experimentation, right? And then we will know more. And when we do a next OKR planning, then we can think maybe 6 months. Now, if somebody claims that they can see that far ahead, they're probably lying to themselves. So no, that should be part of the planning process and budgeting process. And it's a good exercise also because if you want to spend 50% of time in your experimentation, ideally, if you're trying to solve a new problem, right, you know less, and as you keep removing the risk and your experimentation is moving in the right direction, you will become more and more confident, right? And you should be spending more and more time on things which are deliverable, which are more mature. If that is not happening, then that is also not right because, I mean, there are definitely people, I have worked with them in the past, like, I mean, they just kind of always in the experimentation mode, right? And test this and test that. So you have to constrain that experimentation. In fact, there is a great movie on Netflix called General Magic. I don't know if you guys have watched it or not. The General Magic was kind of, I would say, the birthplace of iPod and like smart mobile devices. Many people don't know about it. And Tony Fadell, who was considered the father of the iPod, he's also kind of mentioned in many places in this book, and he talks about this constraints, like doing anything without constraints is kind of like you're gonna spend time innovating, building things that you cannot ship. And General Magic was the biggest kind of example of that thing. Like they kept experimenting and thinking everything was new, everything was equally risky, and they're trying to like kind of pushing the envelope or doing the cutting edge stuff on so many fronts. And they just didn't have schedules. कि कब deliver करना है, क्या करना है. So it's a great example. So, but I think the key point to your answer is experimentation should be part of the planning, and it is also a negotiation with your management because you have to balance it with business goals. It cannot like go on unplanned or unconstrained in that fashion. Does that, and does it happen? Like, I mean, by the way, it's a very common feeling. Like, I mean, engineers want to try out new things, new ways of doing things. They want to, I don't know, refactoring is probably not a good example of experimentation, but many times they're not able to convince tech leads and managers who may be under business and timeline pressure to do that. The way to do this is to accumulate data, right? Or like use the past experience to make case for the future projects rather than kind of fighting over what is happening right now. Okay, next time you're planning a new project, budget, or this is project's ambiguity between 1 to 10 scale is like 7, and we probably will spend X amount of time in like learning, making mistakes, and put that kind of budget in the plan. I think so I think that this is another thing in terms of iteration speed. This has been my personal favorite thing, like automating whatever is boring and redundant. Because if you're iterating and there is a one boring and manual task that somebody has to do, that is the bottleneck. I mean, that will slow things down. Nobody wants to do it. People keep pushing it off. Like, I don't know, it's a manual check of something because nobody has written in a script to see if a test pass or not, or the load test that is supposed to be run, it is flaky. Somebody has to manually run it because you cannot run it automatic fashion because sometimes it fails, sometimes it succeeds. So those kind of tasks, I mean, constant automation, removing them from the kind of your iteration loop and allocating time for that automation is also super important because the gains that you get from that automation in the subsequent iteration cycles, they just keep adding up. It's like a compound effect. So I would say the best engineers that I have worked at Google is that, I mean, they're doing some task and they think that, oh, in order to set up this test, they have to do this step, this step, this step. They will just quickly automate, create like fake environment where they can like bring things up, do end-to-end tests, or maybe create a new framework and just let other people use it. And so other people don't have to spend time on doing these things. I personally have done it, and I think people who are good with things like Python and Perl for scripting and automating, and I think it's part of a culture thing. Does the culture reward those kind of automations or not, and keeping track of it? And I think many times people feel that those things are not appreciated enough. Oh, I will automate this thing, right? It benefits everybody, but how does it affect me? And again, it has to be something culturally driven that, oh, we understand that, I mean, software development processes are tricky, there's so many steps. And whenever we do, for example, at Google, like productivity, how would I say, inventory, people will be asked to like submit, like what are the most what are the tasks which take, let me check on time also, that take most amount of time, or they're like, say most nuisance or most annoyance that is causing people, and then there will be what do you call week-long sprints just to pick them up, fix them. They could be related to documentation because people cannot find how to operate a system. They can be around improving the stability of a test, automating a task that takes 10 steps, reducing it to 2, and this effort is run by a VP. He has been doing it since like, I don't know, 20 years. And he was the one who sends the email that, oh, we will be doing this, what do you call productivity boosters? No. There's some name of that program. They identify things that are blocking productivity, identify them. People allocate time, they fix those things. And then people are given t-shirts and rewards, and it's a big company thing, like they make a big deal out of it. So I think that's where it is important that, I mean, this kind of automation and productivity improvement is recognized at a company level, and it's a part of a culture. So people who are spending time on it, they don't feel okay, they are just, being nerds or being too picky or too picky about things which everybody else is fine with. Like, yes, if it takes 10 steps, so what? I've done it so many times, I will do it again. So, yeah, we talked about this. Any questions on this? Yeah, I mean, it is easier said than done, to be honest. I mean, knowing your loop, figuring out where the blockers are, where to speed them up, where to remove, it just requires constant attention. But definitely. I mean, I think I'll just maybe I have 2 more slides, but I will just cover this one, and maybe we can just do broad Q&A. Of course, we are talking about engineering, but engineering is done by people, and I mean, people have, concerns, and they have personal issues. They may not be fitting well in teams. So psychological safety is actually one of the things that Google identified. They analyzed a bunch of teams at Google, like what are the most productive teams at Google. And at that time, there was this saying in the valley, oh, the 10x engineers, these guys can write code 10 times faster, and everybody would be like, I have seen people like putting in their LinkedIn profile 10x engineer or 10x scorer. And Google figured out that even in the most productive teams, it was not this one individual or the person who was kind of like responsible for or is correlated with the most high performing team. It was actually the overall team which gelled well together, and the listed bunch of attributes, how those teams are, what are the attributes of that team. So I think, oh yeah, the project name is Project Aristotle. And there was another project for management, it was called Project Oxygen. You can actually search for it online, and you can like look at Google actually publish this thing for everybody to kind of benefit from it. So, and what happens in like this 10x engineers team is that there's this super kind of smart guy or coder guy, and he's kind of running the show, or she's running the show. And people assume that this is how, because this guy knows, this person knows everything. Sorry for my gender insensitive use of words, still going through it. So, and I have seen those teams at Google also. And we can tell from our experience that those teams don't work. So I think it is important to have 10x teams and not 10x developers. The superstars, yes, in isolation, if they're like prototyping something, they can go quickly do something. But if they're not team players, and if they cannot pull the team with them, right? Then it doesn't matter how smart or how kind of accredited or people you have on the team, the team will not do good. And yeah, tech leads and managers often, if you're working with extremely smart and ambitious people, they get kind of, they get some discomfort, like, okay, if all these people are doing this stuff, what is my role, and what am I going to get out of it? And so their psychological safety, or I guess their being on board with this is important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you probably have to tell what's the difference between two, because here really there's 1% between.
Oh, okay. So tech lead is somebody who is a great individual contributor. They're great technical skills, and they kind of know the domain inside and out. And manager is somebody, even Google, there's no manager like who is non-technical, but manager is somebody whose primary responsibility is to manage teams, help with career growth. They may have a tech lead reporting to them as part of other teams, but it enables manager to kind of focus on people aspects of the team, and tech lead to focus on the technical aspects. Many companies, small companies, kind of combine both things together. Google actually started with a role called tech lead / manager, but they have now given up on it. They now try to keep it separate because they realize that most of the time, especially for like big teams, manager's job, help people grow, keep like goal setting, doing upward influence, negotiating the goals with leadership, sideways influence. It is a full-time job, and it frees up the tech lead, who's an individual contributor, she's an individual contributor, to kind of work with the team, do design reviews, code reviews, etc. So this distinction is not at Emumba, but I think people naturally, there are people like who are good managers, and there are people who are kind of good technical people, but they're not necessarily good with people.
So I think this distinction does exist at some levels, and I think we are trying to make this a little more discreet as well. I think it's part of our growth exercises. I think one of the things that we've recently been maturing is the role of the project manager. So this is the kind of role that typically doesn't exist in companies like Google. But when in a services company, project managers tend to have a very significant role, because in terms of meeting with customers, putting together project plans, get on sprints, and they end up being quote unquote the managers of the project.
But do they do people management too?
They do.
Oh.
Some teams do other stuff, right? So there is, I mean, it's a mix of both, right? So some people are wearing multiple hats, others are not.
No, I mean, in Google, actually, especially in enterprise-facing teams, we now have a separate role of not only program manager, but technical program manager. Program manager is somebody who's going to keep the project on the schedule. They may manage a team of program managers, but not engineers. And then technical program manager is somebody who also has an engineering background and they understand the technical product very well. They can talk to customers, that the stakeholders understand what the blockers are, and not be like just like program manager who does not understand what's going on. Because many times, I guess in highly technical teams, those people may lose their credibility and respect because they are kind of considered as somebody who's trying to run this ship or like steer this ship, but they don't know what is involved in like kind of steering this ship. So Google is doing it. I don't think Google does as good of a job at it as Microsoft does, but Amazon makes a really good use of those program managers and technical program managers. It's like a very important role there. And I mean, yeah, almost every project would have one. So yeah, I mean, psychological safety, you get different opinions. If there is only one person who is just doing all the talking and thinking and designing, psychological safety, it is a big issue in the Valley now and overall in the tech world, like where there are diverse set of people from different genders, ethnicities, who have been underrepresented and now coming to the tech culture, and they're feeling that, I mean, they either are not as aggressive as the other ones, incumbents, most of the time males, who are like hoarding all the discussions and taking kind of credits and those kind of things. So the idea is to create an environment where everybody gets a chance to speak, chance to kind of let their thoughts be heard. And people are now being trained. Almost everybody goes through this training, like how to create, managers especially, how to create a psychologically safe environment where various, I mean, opinions coming from different segments of the society and of course the team can be heard and kind of taken into account. Otherwise, I mean, there would be team meetings where people will go and two people will just do the all talking and everybody's just listening. And Google also found out that those, I mean, teams also don't perform as well as the teams where people feel psychologically safe. They can share their opinions, they can make mistakes, and they can disagree, first of all, like disagree with people who are in power, and not be afraid of kind of any repercussions because of that disagreement. Because I think it eventually comes down to how comfortable people feel. If everybody's just following and they don't know why they're doing it, they're not convinced, level of productivity of those people is very different than people who are on board or taking the charge and who feel that they have a say in the team's roadmap and planning. So from that perspective, actually psychological safety goes a long way in creating a team which is actually, I mean, high performing. So it's not just technical things that you need to do. It's more of a, how would I say, people or the soft skill aspects of it that you need to train, especially the managers or the decision makers on. Yeah, freedom to make decisions and mistakes. That's, I mean, I kind of covered in what I said here, I think. Yeah, also I think the teams that I have seen like kind of are not sometimes performing well. If they're redundant roles, people don't know what they're doing. If their role is safe, if their career growth and plan, promotion plans, I mean, are kind of tied to the success of the product or not. So I think that is also very important. Like, I mean, not to, I mean, create teams which are small, I mean, have less redundancy, people have clarity, who's doing what, and they're kind of synergetic. Like if one person is good at, I don't know, C++ coding reviews, other person, I don't know, is good at design or the other language that you use, so they're complementing each other, they don't feel redundant. Probably, I mean, if I think hard enough, I can come up with a better example. But yeah, I mean, and more often than not, I mean, if the company is doing good and teams are growing fine, you will end up with teams who people will be concerned about these things. Like, I mean, what is my place in this team? And if X person or X team is doing this thing, what am I supposed to do? And so having, it's kind of like we talk about the team mandate, it's kind of giving an individual a mandate, like this is your expertise. And then there is another book, by the way, the book name is called Drive, and they mention 3 things in it. One is called autonomy, like what people like, what drives them. Autonomy, like give them freedom to like go operate. Other is called mastery, which is, I think I'm talking about like people want to acquire mastery, they want to like great coder, great designer and whatnot. And third is purpose, like why they are doing this thing. So people kind of, you equip them with these things, in general, people will be motivated, self-motivated, and you don't have to like kind of keep pushing them hard enough to kind of move in the direction where the company or the team wants to go. So I think we have 3 minutes remaining, and I have a couple of more slides, but I think it is probably, I mean, I would love to take questions. I mean, if people have thoughts.
Let's go through the slides, whatever material you have.
I think we talked about it. I was talking about mastery here. Like, I think there is no substitute for deep domain expertise, especially if you're doing deeply technical stuff. You cannot kind of wing it. And you cannot just say, oh yeah, I mean, you're building this, I don't know, new machine learning model, and everybody does it, just go figure it out. Every task has its own nuances, its own failure modes. So giving people time to learn and become expert, or hiring the right people, sometimes can be a make or break, because those people have done that many times, made mistakes, and they will help you move fast. If everybody in the team is learning and just doing, that team potentially cannot be high performing from the get-go. So realizing that we don't have domain expertise, we are not good enough to do this yet, and we have to kind of allocate time to either learn or recruit a domain expert before we can more confidently and reliably set our plans. People can, I mean, many times kind of, how would I say, underestimate the importance of that. Because I talked about kind of things which are more procedural, how you negotiate, whatnot, I want to make sure that no high-performing team I have worked with who were really not good at what they were doing, like amazing coders, designers, they really like enjoyed like doing deep discussions on hard problems and like spending hours and hours reviewing code for performance and design, or spending their own time learning stuff. So there is no substitute for that. I just want to kind of point that out. Team talent, we talked about that people should have complementary roles. You should have the right tools. If you don't have, you're training a machine learning model and you don't have resources to train it in cloud or whatnot, I mean, and your experimentation speed on your own GPU or local machine, it takes 10 hours to train a model. I mean, you can only move so fast. So investment and realizing what kind of investment you need and making it part of budgeting and requesting is also important. And continuous learning, I think one of the attributes that I have seen most successful people like, and when I interview people also look, is learnability. Like, has this person ever been through a process where they were put on a task that they didn't know about, and how did they learn, and I mean, what challenges did they see, and I mean, what did they eventually accomplish? And things are changing so fast that if learning is not part of any team's process, they will very soon kind of be obsolete, or they'll be doing things the old way, or probably working on things which are just of maintenance in nature. Well, I think this is also, I mean, little on the softer side, but I think all the high performance engineering teams that I have worked with, it never was the case that people were just interacting with each other during office. They're like working and coding and whatnot. It always turns out that they're going out, hanging out, doing hikes, playing foosball, playing ping pong. I mean, they just love to spend time with each other because kind of they gel well with each other. I'm not saying there is a way of doing it and everybody should be doing it, but it happens that when a team is in a good flow and they're like, they know what they're doing, they're delivering at the fast pace, the team kind of builds their own culture, right? They are, people are kind of, I mean, they will go beyond their ask, right? You will not even ask them, and they will go sometimes spending their own weekend time on this fun project. You don't ask them, but they're enjoying the project so much that they want to kind of do that for their own sake, and they're learning on their own. And there was one more thing I wanted to mention. Yes, I mean, engineers refactoring the code because, I mean, they enjoyed the thing. It is worth their time to refactor because kind of their future is tied to the success of this team, and they feel this is worth going after and making a case for it, right? They'll say, oh, we need to refactor this code because the whole team is spending all the bugs that go in this part of the code. I mean, they're fragile, they come back again and again. We need to go make a case, it's bugged, get time for that, and make everybody's life better. And yeah, I mean, people try to cover for others. I mean, again, same volunteerism. And team builds their own unique culture. And again, ideas kind of pop out of nowhere. Like people will be outside doing lunch, chatting, coffee, and new things will emerge. And then they will come back. Literally, they will come back. Oh, Zia, I was having a lunch with this person, and we discussed that why can't we do it this way, right? And you'll go and like, yeah, this makes sense, and you do it. You cannot engineer that innovation process. It has to be organic. So, but if you're just observing those teams from outside, you don't know how did they arrived at that destination. But if you observe from that side, you will, I mean, I would say 2 of the most successful teams probably had all of this going on. So I think, and that is sense of belonging, and people, we actually built very long-lasting friendships. I'm still friends with some of those team members. They all got into mountain biking, so I got into mountain biking because of those, and they played other games. We did trips, for example. There was, if you do something big at Google, they send you to Hawaii, like go spend time in Hawaii, and sometimes it is the team success that takes you there. Sometimes if teams plan their trips, like, oh, we will fund it, we'll take team's fund budget, we will put extra money in, and we will go to like this nice destination together, and those things will happen. And I'm sure it happens to a certain extent here too in all the teams. And yeah, and then you cherish those experiences. We can just, yes, that's pretty much it, 5 topics that I wanted to cover. If there are any general questions, I'm happy to answer. I don't know what the plan for lunch is. We'll probably, I don't know, stick around. If people want to come afterwards, we can also.
Yeah, we have a bit of time for Q&A.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So I would like to go back to tech lead and manager role, where you discussed about them being different roles. So there was some recent noise from a lot of different high-tech people as well regarding how it is very easy to convert these roles into one, and ultimately leading to fatigue and different. But my question is more about if you sort of separate those roles, how would those 2 people collaborate on deliverables and the people aspects? Because
it's a very good question, actually. I mean, so the question is, if tech lead and manager roles are different, how do those, I mean, are those 2 roles going to collide with each other? And they do. Many times managers, there is a saying like, when you become a manager, you need to learn to give up your Legos, right? Because these managers, they used to be engineers, they used to write code, and they will have opinion and everything, and many times they're overlapping with the role of tech lead, and they're not giving the tech lead the space that they need. Many times the tech lead reports to the manager, many times the tech lead is a peer of the manager, right? That's even trickier position. So, I mean, I think some tension cannot be avoided, it's natural. But I think if manager knows on what criteria they're being judged on and what is their deliverables and goals, and I see no, I think it may help. Like, I mean, manager would realize that I'm being judged on making sure that my team is happy, their career paths are set, I have high retention rate, like people are in general in the surveys, people are happy with being in this team and they plan on staying in the company. So many times what happens is that you give these 2 roles, but you don't judge them differently. So you have to evaluate them differently too. But still, I mean, if people are technical, this will happen, and a lot of that creative tension is good. I mean, tech lead is going to like argue and disagree with other team members too, not just the manager. So some of it is okay, but if it is like, if it feels redundant, then I think it is right to ask question, like, should we have this one person? Or, I mean, and many times what happens is that you know that this tech lead, if you give him or her task to manage individuals, their productivity will go down. They will not go do a good job on managing these people. People will be unhappy because they're not busy unblocking them. They're busy writing code, designing. And I don't know how here are there tons and tons of, I mean, for the lack of a better word, nerds at Google who are amazing ICs, but they just cannot deal with people. They cannot manage them. They cannot help. This is not how they spend their brain cycles. So if that clarity exists, then it's easy. Manager is helping, I mean, with career growth, unblocking the team, I mean, budgeting and many other tasks. And the tech lead has very clearly defined role. He's going to be reviewing major codes, reviews major designs, they're designing themselves, they're coding themselves. So many times it doesn't come up. But I think in general, the main problem in my opinion is you divide the roles, but you don't divide the evaluation criteria. And that creates problems.
That makes sense. One follow-up question. For the cultures you have experienced,
Mhm.
can a tech lead sort of influence people who are working with them, influence career growth of people who are working with them via some feedback to their manager?
You're talking about like an informal, so the question is, can the tech leads influence or help the career growth of the team members by talking to or giving feedback to the manager? I mean, this is one of their jobs. Actually, let's say if somebody is an L6 tech lead at Google and they're managing a bunch of L5s, right? One of their goal is that once this L5 goes for an L6 promotion, this tech lead is going to be on their review packet, and they're supposed to write, and people will be looking for the feedback like, oh, what does this tech lead say about this person? Is that person ready to go to the next level or not? So it is, and managers usually will work with those tech leads that, oh, I think this person is ready for promotion. Work closely with them because you will be writing their feedback. I want your feedback to be thorough and like meaty and meaningful and not superficial. So yeah, it is, I would say, it is one of the main responsibilities of the tech lead to kind of provide technical guidance and kind of technical growth path. They're usually responsible for technical roadmap also. So there is maybe a product roadmap and there's a technical roadmap, like how the architecture of this product is going to grow, what components need to be added. So they are responsible and they are working with their whatever junior engineers all the time, and they're usually the best people to kind of grow. Just one thing, in Amazon there is a very interesting role called principal engineer. It's kind of a role where you're expected, like you will stop coding, but you're mostly like the, what do you call, like the more senior engineer who has seen Amazon, how the processes work. One of their core responsibility is to actually grow people, to get people promoted and get people promoted to their level. And a side note, it is also considered a good attribute that if you're ready to go to the next level, that if you can promote people to your level. So, I mean, I hope all of these points kind of give answer to your question. Yes, tech lead plays a really crucial role, but the feedback, if it is like around performance and low performance, that is a separate question.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that probably you want to mention that there are two different career paths. One is like staff engineer, principal engineer, and manager. So that may not be that clear.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there are two different career paths, and I think a company usually decides that, I mean, if it makes sense and how senior those paths can go. Every team has a different culture. There was a time, so IC will go on like, I mean, staff, senior staff, principal, distinguished, and whatnot. And managers will go on to manager, senior manager, director, VP, that kind of a path. But I have seen increasingly, even in big companies, that even principal engineers who are ICs, now they have like tens of people and sometimes hundreds of people working under them because they want to stay engineer. For example, I think Jeff Dean, who is Google's most well-known engineer, he's a senior fellow. He has, I think, an organization of about 3,000 people under him, Google Brain. But his title is not, he would write SVP, but his title is still like senior Google fellow, senior fellow. So he is still on technical track, but he's managing a team of, I mean, very large team. So they can influence the team. And there are a bunch of course, good managers under him. And he's probably a good manager himself too, otherwise I guess he will not take that big of an org. So, any other question?
There's one question from the YouTube audience that you have. Right?
Oh, okay. How many thousand people are watching this live right now?
Minus the 1,000.
Yeah.
So the question is around how does, in high performance team, if you have a scenario where the stakeholders are asking for very fast delivery, but you then have to compromise quality, and that leads to later on debt.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the appropriate way in that high performance team do you manage it? Which role over there?
I mean, I don't necessarily, so the question is how do you manage expectations in a high performance team with your management if there is a pressure for deliverables, right? How do you negotiate? I don't think it is necessarily just tied to high performance teams. I guess these are the negotiation skills that you would have to learn. But for example, some of the kind of great engineers that I've worked with, you tell them like, hey, this needs to be delivered fast. And they will straight away tell you like, oh, this is not going to work. And if you want this, this is the compromise we are going to make, right? And you just put it down like, oh, this system is not going to perform. And many times what these people do is that what happens is that an engineer is trying to implement a feature which is written for this customer, right? And there are like 20 different people in the chain who have their own opinion on what customer wants and how much they're willing to wait for. If you go directly to the customer and you tell them that, hey, you're going to get a crappy outcome in 6 months and you get a great outcome in 12 months, probably it's not a good example. Let's say 3 versus 6, because 6 versus 12 is a big difference. Customers may say, yes, I will wait for it because I don't want to like migrate to this kind of API that will be deprecated later, or I'll have to do things differently. So, and I've seen good senior engineers using this technique. Like if somebody's pushing, like, what is the source of this pressure? Is it your personal opinion? Is the customer asking it as a sales engineer? And when you dig deeper, like you go talk to people, just many times you figure out that people, I mean, don't have a good reason to kind of make a case for urgency. It's just their opinion. Maybe they want to, people do things for weird reasons. Maybe it's tied to their performance review that is coming up. So figuring out, debugging that process, like why is this pressure being exercised? Why is it, you can to a certain extent empathize with the person too, right? You don't have to fight with them, like maybe they're under pressure. And when you dig deeper, more senior people I've seen, they're able to do that. They will go, because if you're fixing a problem, you're not just talking to the person who's giving you OKR. You're talking to the technical solutions architect, you're talking to their, your kind of skip report, skip manager. So they're able to kind of, and in general, people are good at engineering and surviving in complex environments. They usually do a good job at building that network. So they have this gossip that is traveling over chat and whatnot. They will quickly go, if the manager is saying this needs to be implemented and they're working with this solutions architect or customer engineer who's working with it, they'll ping them like, is this really the case? And that person will probably say no or yes, and then you can tell them that this is not the case. So I think don't assume that you have like this one-to-one map, a relationship with this person who is exercising influence on you. I guess if you just broaden your horizon, figure out who the other stakeholders are, where the truth is traveling, and kind of just do a little bit exploratory work, you may realize that, I mean, it is genuine pressure or it is just something fake. But it's kind of an age-old question. I don't think it will die down anytime soon. But I mean, as I said, this is probably one way of doing it. And second way is that write down that even if they don't come back and give you that refactoring time that you need to pay off the technical debt, at least get it down in writing, like, yes, we are agreeing that we will do this thing in 3 months, with engineering team things that will need to be in 6 months. And if it ever is productionized, we will get to implement, I don't know, refactor this thing, because if we productionize it, it's going to be a poor quality software, our pages will be ringing, and customer experience will be bad. Another thing, which Amazon is really good at, in all this situation, I guess always tie things to the customer or whoever needs it. A lot of time people are just discussing their personal opinion. If you tie it to the customer need, it always kind of helps to kind of narrow down the focus and the discussion. So yeah, I think writing may help in that case. And many times if the code is thrown away, and I think people sometimes do genuinely want to get things out, they're mitigating the risk. Why spend 6 months on something which they don't even know is going to have one customer or not? But if they somehow get a customer, then they will buy time and fix and refactor things and make things work. So understanding those business constraints is also important. I mean, engineering for the sake of engineering or writing beautiful code, I mean, itself is not kind of, I mean, it's a good thing, but I think it's an eventual goal, and you can iterate and refactor your way through it.
So along those same line, like the negotiation thing that you might have to negotiate things objectives, like you might come up with, you don't really need to do it this way, or maybe you need more time. But I side and the business side or the managerial side can sort of same goal that they are striving for
Mm-hmm.
can come from business objectives. So, have you sort of seen what if you like to my mind, if you can sort of distill it down to it, generally speaking, if you want to create that alignment quickly in that negotiation, and let's say it's going to come from the business objectives being pursued, so उसके अंदर वो क्या मोटी those big dimensions in there that like I can think of like cost or scale of the solution or time to market, like those kind of things. Like if this something is being negotiated, you need to do it this way. Then you can come up with good alignment if everybody sort of clear कि भाई यहाँ पे which one, what are we pursuing here, and if that is the objective, like sometimes somebody might be sort of maybe demanding something which is not reasonable, does not align with the objective, and that can mean.
And that's where I think, so you're right, so I think Rizu is pointing out that aligning things with the business objectives and like talking about like, I think seeing things in a more systematic manner, like, I mean, you want to do this thing, what is it? Do you want more performance? You want to reduce the cost? Do you want to go time to market? It helps in narrowing down the conversation, and completely agree. And that's where I think writing down the goals is important, because if people are just coming up with these requirements from their brain or their mind and they're just thinking at runtime, it can definitely create tension and also, I mean, resentment also, like, I mean, oh, the boss just wants whatever they say, they just want it to be implemented. So I think writing objectives down is super helpful. Like, I mean, what are we trying to accomplish with this customer in next 6 months? And this is you're asking, does it align with what we're trying to accomplish? If not, then hopefully whoever is exercising the pressure may themselves learn that, I mean, they're not being reasonable. And most people realize it once you show them the fact. And if there is I think there is definitely a extreme side of it, which is people are throwing documents on each other, like, oh, you said this and you said that, this email said this. So, I mean, that has to be taken into account too. Things change and context, like, oh, yes, we wrote this document 3 months ago, but this material stuff has happened since then. So we need to make sure that we take that into account too. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you that, I mean, that the alignment with business goals, especially if they're written a little bit more concrete, can help.
But I was thinking of it because I was sort of trying to think how does this align with like a services organization, which we primarily are. And there I think, again, maybe it's the business objectives that can help us understand, like for instance, like it's a fail fast wali, Samir had a good question around that. Okay, that's good, fail fast, but when do I have to get that time to fail fast? So again, I guess it's like you have to, if the business objective, like, because each customer would be kind of unique, but I guess there's some overarching objectives that we can put in place that irrespective of the customer, we always sort of values or goals that we pursue. But I think the whole thing, like,
so you're probably talking about the quality objectives of the organization as a whole.
But then overall, all of these like 5 key points, how would they apply to a services organization? That's what I was trying to figure out. They, like you laid out high complexity and biggest problems and focus teams, highly skilled focus teams. So how can we extend that a little bit and see how does this apply in the services context? So I think maybe the business objectives thing can help us sort of stretch things a little bit and see it has now this idea applies to us this way.
I agree. Business objectives, overall, the organization's quality objectives, but what are they recognized for? Are they recognized for like quick implementations or like some kind of a technical depth and or time to market, those kind of things? And yeah, I mean, those are the non-functional kind of things that help. Otherwise, people kind of will keep coming back to more fundamental questions. Who are we as a company? Are we known for quality? Are we known for time to market, or, I mean, or something else? So yeah, those goals can definitely help. I mean, I cannot wear services hat and like kind of think, or maybe I can do a little bit, but I would imagine that even within, how big is Emumba, like 200 people? Okay. That, I mean, there will be like some, I don't know if there is an effort to speed up other teams by writing common frameworks, common processes, common libraries, common ways of doing things. And those tasks can be, or those things can be taken as a product that you are building maybe for internal customers. And I do know that, I mean, I know that Emumba has dabbled into product development here and there a little bit too. So, I mean, that it can, some of the things I'm mentioning from product perspective and ambiguity perspective can be applied. Also, when you are going into a new domain, let's say you want to acquire new skills in data science and machine learning, right? Or taking a new project on those areas, I think those teams will most likely go through the same tension, same negotiation between customers, between the team's expertise, between what like a management team wants to achieve. So I think some discussion may still apply in some kind of scenarios.
So, I'll comment a little bit. I think engineering reuse is a very desirable objective. जो कि मुझे लगता है कि शायद services company में attain करना थोड़ा ज़्यादा complex होता है because different teams.
Every project is very unique.
Uniformity भी कम होती है diversity. It is still to an extent achievable. That's a need. However, I think this is the second part of the question. कि best practices का reuse is very important for us. Right? What are the best engineering practices in terms of how we do engineering, the process? जिसको अगर एक अच्छे तरीके से replicate किया जाए, तो you can expect कि हाँ उसका एक meaningful outcome मिलेगा. And a follow up on that is perhaps a question in your mind. Again, मतलब पाकिस्तानी context में देखें, where we generally have younger teams, where you don't have a lot of people with a lot of experience, right? If you have to put together a new team, तो वो क्या best practices and processes के point of view से ये environment तीन चार चीजें हैं जो कि कभी break नहीं मिल सकते. मिसाल के तौर पे code review लाजमी होगा या नहीं होगा, या आपने code coverage के लिए कुछ tooling करनी है, तो कुछ process की चीजें, कुछ tooling की चीजें. तो वो क्या बुनियादी चीजें जो कि organizations like Google में तो it's a fact of life. But in a clean slate environment, what are those 2, 3 or 5 things you would put together? Yeah, ये तो लाजमी होनी चाहिए environment चीजें.
I mean, I think I think कुछ चीज़ें अपनी standard हो गई industry में. I did not go into those details myself, क्योंकि they apply to probably all engineering team के CI/CD किस तरह करनी है, load testing, system testing, integration testing, or automated rollouts, automated rollbacks, right? Canarying when you're deploying to a larger. So I think depending on the project, those things can change. But I mean, I think automated builds, automated deployments are things which kind of make life easy, and there's so many products available that we can definitely use. Test dashboards, coverage tooling, right? And certain metrics around, I guess, load and stress testing. I think they should be there from the get-go. I mean, we started a project recently, like, I mean, there was no reason to test it for stress. But I said, imagine that you will be stress testing it or load testing it. It had an impact on how you're going to design and compartmentalize different functions, because when you put them in production, they're using different components, but when you're testing, they're using different components. So it helps you. A testable system is designed differently. You have to think about, okay, can you kind of have interfaces that can be abstracted out and replaced with like mocks and whatnot. So it does help. I mean, thinking from testing and like perspective, it helps you design the system in a good way, and you can incrementally build it. Hopefully design good interfaces between different key components that need to be tested. So yeah, I mean, I'm personally a big, and there are many standard libraries and tools which will help you kind of, I mean, debug the system or like generate proper logging or proper like data points that you can use it to.
And we don't even understand. At times it is lack of awareness, and most of the time it is lack of appreciation of what value it brings to the mix over a period of time. And I think one of the things that we want to do now is to create those whatever checklist of either define and use which project in order to projects to make later. Right? Okay. These जो code coverage है, I think we're very behind of that. I mean, a lot of teams don't even know that code coverage होनी चाहिए. So testing हो रही है. वो developers कर रहे हैं, unit testing भी शुरू हो रही है, या application भी शुरू हो रही है, coverage हम capture नहीं कर रहे. And I think monitoring and visibility point of view, I don't think some projects are more mature. And the pattern is that in projects where we're working with a customer team, like the way we're working with your team, right? A very mature set of right? So when we have a mature customer, those teams tend to have more mature practices, and if we don't have that, we internally are not yet mature enough to a point where our processes go established. This is the reason, one of the reasons why we're talking about all these topics, but it's a key area of our improvement and focus right now.
Actually, so now I think that's why this kind of discussion has to be interactive. Now I'm thinking about things which are kind of, we do it like Google and can be beneficial. So in Google there is a separate org, it's called Engineering Productivity Org. And they help set up these tools like automated testing tools, and they have their mandate. They don't work exclusively with every team, like, but some teams may get allocated like, oh, they're creating this new system. They need to create a nice load test that works for them, and hopefully they can create a framework around it, and it can be used by other teams too. But engineering productivity team, what they also do is that, for example, they will have certification levels for each team. And they will have level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level 1 would be your test coverage is 20% or 30%, right? And you have integration tests, and you have like a monitoring or whatever, and then test 2 has level 2 has different requirements for coverage, level 3 has different, and then, so they have created this standard across Google, and you can potentially do it among yourselves too. And then you can say that, oh, for this team, when you're actually starting a team, and you're about to launch a product, you have to say what level certification you need. It's not like a very elaborate process, it's just a set of things, checklist. So you will say, I think it has a high customer impact if things go wrong, right? And we believe that we need to have a more rigorous process around testing, around static code analysis, around load testing. So we will strive for level 4, and it will take us, I don't know, 3 extra months, because writing all these tests and framework just takes time. So then you will aspire for that level, and then you will kind of, and there is an automated monitoring of it, if I remember correctly. So if one of those things are not working, you will not achieve your level. So when somebody signs it off for launch, like you're good to go, they can check like whatever your described goals were, are you achieving these things or not? So the dashboard's good thing is that in the company they're publicly visible, everybody can see every team's dashboards, maybe except for some secretive teams or the people don't want to leak, कि वो क्या कर रहे हैं. So those dashboards are common, everybody can see everybody's dashboards. You can go back in history, you can see how far back you can go. Okay, if test started failing, you can go back in history and say when did it start failing, and it will run that whole suite of tests on every checklist. So you can go and you can like see, oh, this checklist or this change list broke the test, and then you can find out who ran it, then you can revert it. And many times you cannot even submit, because most of the time these tests go in when they become flaky. Like, yes, it passed on submit, but 2 times it fails, 3 times it succeeds. Then later you figure out, oh, somebody checked in a change that kind of broke things for others. So those tools are pretty sophisticated. I don't know what is the status of those things in open source. I know in Git you can do blame, right? You can look at the code, you can look at the line, who wrote it, and you know exactly who wrote it. And if you know the code was crashing or breaking here, you could at least have some way to investigate how to go back and like talk to the right people and start investigating it. So there is a tool internally called TAP. It's called the test, it's basically test dashboard, where you can see everybody's test suites running, their unit tests, their regression tests, their integration tests, their load tests, and their status going back in time many, many weeks. So it just helps everybody on the team to figure, because many times you have dependency with other teams, right? If your tests are broken, is there something broken on their end too, or did they just break something for you? So if those dashboards don't exist, they can be a great way. I think the first step is to start measuring and monitoring, and then second step will be to start setting goals, and then kind of judge or evaluate yourself against those goals. So अगर वो tools set up नहीं हुए, I guess that's what you're trying to point out.
These tools are available, but they're protected. There's cruise control, Sun, and there's so many others, and they all include, but they're tools.
Okay. Yeah. In fact, many of those tools, for example, the web-based code review tool that started web-based code reviews, it was actually my 20% project at Google with a person called Guido von Rossum, who is the creator of Python. It was his kind of starter project at Google. So we started it and we open source it, and then before that what people would do is that they will open 2 code windows and then they will open an email and then they will start writing like, oh, on line 20 you should do that, and line 30 you should do that. But now people don't even think about it. So yeah, a lot of this tooling is actually made available by companies like Google, Facebook, Airbnb, and other. Sahi. And I mean, yeah, I mean, CI/CD is such a very mature field now. I mean, when continuous integration and continuous deployment, and the companies are built around, and I mean, I don't know what people are using in industry right now, but I mean, I know that, I mean, for example, some of my teams used to talk about how to do it for Kubernetes systems, and there's a huge community around it, because without that, you cannot build reliable systems. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Let's take one last question.
Sure, go ahead.
So my question is about reuse and software engineering wisdom. So it's easy to reuse, but I think it's even more easier to get it all wrong. But and there are certain levels of reuse as well. For example, maybe you are reusing services at API level, or maybe libraries, or maybe just plain classes. My question, I mean, there are obviously trade-offs to each of them. But my question is more about companies where you have worked. What was sort of the preferable way of reusing stuff? How much weightage should be assigned to each level of the reuse?
So the question is around reuse, like how to think, like how much to reuse and how much to build again from scratch. And I mean, I think I can probably talk for too long for this, but let me just, I think people, especially new software engineers, when they start writing code, if they even like get a kind of a hint of, oh, this is something very similar to that they have seen somewhere else, right? Somebody else has written it, they will go, if the function is already written, they will try to reuse it, or I don't know, some library available on the web, they will try to like import it and like integrate it with the system and do it. There is some value to it. I'm trying to remember a quote from one of very early engineers of Google. He used to say that he wants to reuse a small number of libraries a lot, rather than reusing large number of libraries a little bit here and there. So figure out what those core libraries are. Like, I don't know, is C++ a common language here? Okay, like STL, everybody is using it. So first thing is that, I mean, don't try to create like this overly dependent software which depends on like 3,000 different packages in the world. For the code that you are writing, I think it is also kind of maybe a little bit enticing to say that, oh, I will convert everything to the reusable library. It is too easy to take a snapshot of time कि ये code अभी ये कर रहा है, ठीक है? And then see, oh, ये तो ये भी use कर सकते हैं, this person can use it, that person can use it. You have to also think about कि उस code की evolution क्या होगी, where will that code end up being, let's say in 1 year, right? If that code's non-functional requirement around performance, around reliability, around support, whose person is going to support it, you're not clear about, or they're very different from yours, then just write it again. Maybe duplicate it for now and let those both code pieces evolve. Maybe there's some small pieces that they can share and they can put that in the library, but own the APIs, because APIs सिर्फ function call तो नहीं है, उसके semantics हैं, उसकी क्या नाम है कि performance क्या होगी, उसकी अपना latency, उसकी और ये कि वो evolve कैसे करेगा, और and don't depend on something. Whoever is writing that library that you want to reuse, don't depend on it if you're not their primary customer. I think Amazon taught one good thing, they kind of differentiate between primary and secondary customer. So primary customer is somebody like who directly uses your product, that's maybe your money is coming from, and secondary customer is somebody who you want to benefit kind of as a secondary goal, maybe they're internal developers at Amazon. For example, when we got acquired by Twitch, there was this team called SageMaker. I mean, it was not that popular at that time. We went to them, say, we do this huge video analysis of these videos, and we want to use your system for this. And this is a huge system. Like Twitch is not like any other system in the world. Maybe there are 3 or 4 systems like that. So they were very clear to us, like, oh, our primary customers are developers outside Amazon, like people like you. So just beware that if you have a feature request, we may not prioritize it above like those customers' requirement. Doesn't matter who you are, because their performance criteria is what? How many developers are using SageMaker, how much money they are paying, right? And if some internal customer goes and starts using this API, that's great, right? I mean, they can write it in their system like, oh, so many internal teams use, but it doesn't move the needle for them. So they told it to us. Maybe it has changed right now. So don't depend on somebody's code, especially in a critical way, if you're not their primary customer. The function or library may look like something which kind of is useful to you, but if they're moving at a different speed, they're going to take the code base in a completely different direction, it's okay. Be comfortable with some redundancy. I think that's another thing. Like people think that, oh, if I wrote these two things, functions, they're similar, right? And somebody's going to say, why are you writing it again, right? I wrote it. It is okay, and I think this is something I personally learned from one of our SVPs was giving this talk. To be comfortable with some of this redundancy, especially at a big company like Google, is important. Because you cannot like bring 5 different teams and say, use this library, right? Or I started using your library, why are you changing it this way? You broke it for us. I said, I don't know, you were using my library. So I think, I guess bunch of points, but I think it's a very, philosophy around reuse can be a very tricky topic. There are of course 2 extremes, that reuse everything, and the other is reuse nothing. I'm going to write everything from scratch. Usually your constraints around time and your own resources, right, will tell what kind of path you will take. So I guess this was the last question, and well, thanks everyone for coming. And I hope I know I was talking it from the perspective of my experiences, but I hope some of it is enough applicable to your lives, and happy to answer questions offline, and we may be hanging around for a little bit. Just come and ask questions if you have any.
Yeah, let's give a thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.